you exactly what people mostly get hung up when they make this cut, this type of cut here. So we're cutting across the grain. So we're going to use the crosscut teeth on the saw, right? And where people get hung up is they're coming across like this, across the face, right? And you get a little too eager and you want to make progress a little too quick. So you drop the heel of the saw down and the tip of the teeth out here come out of the curve that you created, and now the saw starts to skate around, right? And then you lose your line and it starts to become really, really messy, right? Now, one other thing to always remember is that the saw is like the bulk, coarse, rough removal tool, right? So nobody is expecting you, and you shouldn't be expecting yourself, to saw perfectly to this line, right? You always want to be sawing some amount of material away from the line, so that then you have the line stays, and then you can come in back and chisel to, right? Last week we talked about the knife line. We want to be putting our chisel right in that knife line. So you're never going to be sawing so perfectly to the line. So don't worry about the saw cut being perfectly straight or perfectly angled or perfectly clean, as long as you haven't sawn over your line. That's the key. That being said, you can be as conservative as you want, right? I could come and make my cut all the way out here, right? Far away, half a centimeter away from my line, and I would have half a centimeter of chiseling to do, right? So the further away from your line you go, the safer you are from going over your line with your saw, but the more chiseling you have to do, right? So the other thing that you can do as well, because this is all waste material over here, you can come halfway into the piece and just do a test. I can kind of eyeball where my line is over here, and I can just do a test over here where it's a little bit shorter, right? It's not the same length of cut, and just see how it feels like. Am I going too quick and now it's coming out of the kerf and it's wandering around a bit, right? There's nothing stopping you from just making as many cuts and kerfs and tests as you want over here to get a feel for it, right? So it's low commitments. You can ease into it if you like. So back to the actual cut. So I started at the top corner here, right? And I'm gonna bring the cut, it's gonna work the cut back, and the goal, as like always with the Japanese saw, is to think of this as a piece of string, right? The piece of string is tied, is held firm here, and I'm keeping it taut in tension. And as I do that, I can swing it and I can tilt it to get it in position to be kind of parallel to the line that I want to cut, right? But that's the idea. We're also starting on the far side. Sometimes people have an inclination to start the cut near them. But if you do this, right? If we keep this idea of the string in our minds, there's nothing really holding the tip of the saw stable, right? So it helps if you start on the far side of the cut. That way it's always stable like that. Now, I'm gonna come down like this. I don't wanna come down too far because this is an edge that I can't see from my vantage point, and I'm not allowed to cut a line that I can't see, right? So I can come down a little bit just to give myself enough bite, enough material for the teeth to stay in. And then I'm gonna lengthen the cut along the face without these teeth ever coming up out of the cut. And I'm going to lengthen that cut along the face by dropping the heel of the saw down a little bit every time, right? So go back to here like that. So I'm kind of at this position here. You can see the saw is sitting at a bit of an angle, and the teeth here are slightly raised up off the surface there, right? So I'm going to go straight back. So I'm maintaining the angle there, and I'm going to tip down a little bit. You can see I've just moved it down just like, by 1 degree, and I'm going to go back again. And that's lengthened the cut slightly. I'm gonna go forward, back again, forward, back again. And every time I do that, I drop it down a little bit. And this is the part where if you get a little too eager and you go a little too quick, that comes out. And as soon as that comes out, then it skates around, right? So nice and slow, nice and easy. The other thing that this really helps to kind of reinforce is the idea of sawing in a nice like linear motion. Another thing that causes people to kind of trip up in this cut is the kind of a bowing motion or an arc motion. And if you do that, you will inherently leave on the other side, right? So in joinery, it's in using Japanese hand saws or normal hand saws as well. If the goal is to establish a cut with a level plane, kind of in the base of the cut, it behooves you to kind of practice just going like in a linear motion, whatever angle you're working at, instead of doing any sort of like curving motion like that, right? So, come again, we'll come across, so straight, and then every time tipping down a little bit more, tipping down a little bit more. As I'm going, I'm watching my line progress. If I need to make any adjustments, I can, but be mindful that the adjustments that you can make are minimal, right? Like, you're not steering the saw like that, right? It's still a piece of string. And then every time, down a bit, whoop, see, there it goes. I went down a little too fast and the teeth popped up on that side. And I was being impatient because I wanted to move on to the next part of the demo. And that's exactly what happens, right? So there we go. Right now I've got teeth embedded into the material all the way across the cut. I've got an even curve all the way down, and I've kept parallel to my layout line. Now this is quite close. Like I said, you can be up here. Especially on your first cut, you're going to do this exact cut 4 times just now for this joint. So there's nothing stopping you for the first one to be a bit conservative. And then if you feel, all right, that one okay. The next one, get a little closer. The next one, get a little closer, right? So now that I've got that done, I'm going to continue the cut. Now again, I'm not allowed to cut a line that I can't see. And I've positioned myself nice and kind of square on the line on the cut here. But I can see this cut down this face here. So now the goal is to connect a straight line from this point here where I stopped the curve to the center point down here, right? Which for you guys that can't see over there, right? It's that part there. So from my vantage point, I can see this line. So as I'm sawing down, I can watch this cut and I can see if I'm going to steer into it or if I'm steering away from it. Over here, I can't see that line at the moment. The line is just the corner of the piece. So I would have no way to know if I'm steering into it or away from it or what's going on, right? So I'm going to go from here to that corner there. And again, back to the concept of like a straight line with your cut, right? It's exactly the same concept that we were doing as we were coming across the face. I'm going to go straight. And now my saw is at like almost at a bit of a hinge at the back here, right? Every cut, I'm going a little bit deeper on this side without ever going higher this way, right? Again, don't be too eager. If you're too eager and too quick there, that's going to happen, and then it's going to start to skate around on you. And I'm trying to just keep the saw linear, straight as I work my way down. And I'm watching the cut and just seeing them staying parallel, giving it a bit of a steer if I need to. Always trying to maintain these teeth back here. Pretty slowly. Right, so if I press the saw down here real quick, now you can see the teeth are still pretty much here on the corner, and that's a straight line now with the saw teeth down to the interior, to the inside corner down there, right?
So have you gone right to that halfway line or just stopped just to...
Stop just short. Same rules apply, right? Like I'm going to be chiseling, and on this cut as well, this cut that I'm about to show you in a sec, this vertical cut, you're going to be creating curve just on the inside here. So you have a lot of room to stop short before having to come close to this, and you're going to be removing a bunch of material. So, and you can also go back, always go back and saw a little bit more. right? So if you haven't quite reached it, just you'll a couple more passes afterwards, and then you say, okay, perfect, now it's good. All right, now you see I flipped it around. I'm doing the same cut. I can't see this side, but that's fine. The kerf is there. The kerf will hold the saw where it wants to be. And now I can watch this corner as I progress the cut down. And now I can hold the saw level, right? I don't have to kind of connect anything at an angle because, like I said, as this comes down, the saw will stay in the kerf there. So back to the idea of keeping kind of a linear level sawing stroke. That will just help me as I get to the bottom of the cut, because then I'll have created kind of a flat plane. I'm steering into the cut a little bit. I'm going to adjust slightly. Okay, getting close. I'll slow down a little bit. I'm nearly there on this side, and I'm pretty well at the base of my cut there. Clear the sawdust out a little bit. So if I press this down, I can see my teeth are touching here, my teeth are touching there, and that's your cue that you have a nice flat bottom at the bottom of your kerf, right? It's not doing anything like this. If you did any sort of rocking motion, you'd press your saw down and your teeth will be high here, or if you press this side, they'll be high over there. So that's an indication that you need to keep going and level that out. All right, so that's the end of the first cut. You can see here, I started to notice that I was steering into the bit a little bit there. So just a slight little adjustment and just kind of turning it in. Now mind you, when you're turning and adjusting the saw, you only have the width of the kerf to work with. So when we're talking about steering, we're not talking about like steering a car, right? You're not steering it, you're just adjusting it ever so slightly, right? And that's kind of that baby bird kind of feedback. This is the amount that we're talking about to steer the saw, right? All right, so that's that first cut. This next cut here, we've got kind of 3 corners, right? 1, 2, 3, instead of the other one, which was 1, 2, 3, 4. So this, I can orient the piece to be able to see the whole thing at once, right? I can look at this here, I can see this line and I can see that line. So that's convenient. I'll do that to make my life a little bit easier. So I'll pop that in the vise here like that. Same rules apply. I'm going to go to the side of my cut a little bit. And let's give a go with the rib teeth and see how this feels. Alright, so again, same thing. I'm starting on the corner. I'm going to set myself however comfortable I feel getting close to the line. Starting on the corner like this with the rib teeth, it's easy for the teeth to get kind of fully into the corner, which might make it awkward to kind of start the saw. So again, there's nothing wrong with starting a cut with the cross-cut side and then flipping over to the rib teeth, getting it started. So that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to kind of intentionally steer into the cut. So I'll pass this around. We'll just have a look here. So right, I was coming across here and you can see I started to steer into the line there, right? And that's quite an aggressive steer into the line. At this point, I would want to be careful to try and steer that back away from the line, because then what I'm going to end up with is a little bump in my kerf, right? As that one came out this way and then I force it back over there, that little curve in my kerf is constantly going to be binding on my saw as it's trying to work its way down through the straight cut, right? So the way to recover from this is rewind and try and establish a new curve just to the side where you want to be. Now, the trick with that is that path wants to take the saw of least resistance, so it's always going to want to fall back into the kerf that was out of position. So you just want to be a little bit careful and a little bit delicate when you're starting that new kerf off to the side and bringing it down. And what's a good way to see? So you guys really can see. I'll do it on that side there so that you guys can kind of come around